After finally beating Vitalis, after many tries, I can finally feel content in saying that I have beaten Monster Hunter World. Truly, the Vitalis fight is the culmination of everything Monster Hunter World has been building to. It's a tough fight that will more often than not end with you getting your ass kicked, especially if you're trash like me, but it's completely worth it. Vitalis armor and weapons are by far the best in the game from a stats perspective, and are just so cool to look at. So after 2.5 years of playing World on and off, how do I feel about the game finally coming to an end? Well, I feel pretty content. I said in a previous video that World was my favorite game of all time, and I stand by that. So while yes, I am a bit sad that we finally reached the end of the road of major updates for the game, I realize that all good things must come to an end. So I decided to make this video to give a little retrospective and reminisce about my journey through Monster Hunter World, and to look at the future a little with the coming of a new Monster Hunter game in Rise. So to start at the beginning, I bought World a few days after launch, really on a whim because I had just moved and I had some time to kill. I'd never really played a Monster Hunter game before, but it looked a lot like a Dark Souls game from the trailers I saw, so I thought why not give it a try. Through my first couple play sessions of the game, I had a really good time and thoroughly enjoyed the game, but for some reason after a week, I just about completely dropped the game. I'm not really sure why I did, besides the fact that not too long after, I got my first gaming PC and was probably preoccupied with that. It wasn't until the summer when I decided to finally pick the game up again. I beat the game's main story and then just hit the ground running. For like a month, I played the game non-stop, trying to build all the armor sets and weapons I wanted. I can safely say that other than a game like Destiny, I had never been more dedicated to a game. I just loved everything about it, from the tremendous sense of scale to the individual monsters themselves. Turns out hitting monsters with a really big sword is a very enticing prospect. After getting all the weapons and armor I wanted, I slowly started dropping the game again, though albeit in a much more finished state. After a few months of not playing the game, I decided to pick it up again, but little did I know what was going to happen next. This time around, I was going to play the game on a new Xbox One X that I had got. While launching the game, the usual data sync was taking too long and I hit cancel to see what was up, and then I was greeted by all of my data being completely gone. The sync hadn't fully completed, so basically the game just decided to make all new data. This was a completely devastating blow to be honest, and it felt really shitty to have all my work just gone to the wind. I decided to wait until the Steam Summer Sale rolled around so I could just get the game for my PC. Between then, a major expansion for the game was announced in Iceborn. As a complete sucker for icy/snowy environments in games, I was totally bought into Iceborn and couldn't have been more excited. Well, once the Steam Summer Sale rolled around, I got the game for my PC, and over the course of 2 weeks, I grinded out the game's main story and built a few meta sets. I also for the first time did the Kulif Terror Siege, which I'm honestly not a huge fan of. It's okay, but really I felt like it was just completely outclassed by the siege that came after, which we'll get into later. Regardless, I dropped the game yet again and decided to wait for the Iceborn expansion, which PC sadly had to wait a bit longer for. I didn't look at any gameplay between then as I wanted to go in fresh, but the reviews for Iceborn really told me all I needed to know. So finally we reached January and the release of Iceborn for PC. I've already talked about how I feel about Iceborn itself in my review of it, so I won't go too in-depth here, but yeah, just an absolute masterclass of game expansions. After the initial release, PC spent a few years catching up to the console version in terms of updates. Raijing was added, which, to be completely honest, I don't really care for them that much. I think he really doesn't have the charm of much of the other monsters since he's just basically a giant gorilla who's fucking pissed. But hey, at least he's a decent challenge and came along with an even more decent armor set. Next we had the addition of Stygian Zig Ogre. Basically just a harder version of the regular Zig Ogre, so not much to say there. Along with him though came the game's best large-scale activity in Safy. Safy is basically a siege version of the game's original boss fight, Xenojiva. Your group and other groups in the session have to work together to break parts of Safy to get it weakened enough to eventually defeat. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's more or less the same from the Kulif Terror Siege with only a few minor differences. That being said, I much prefer the Safy Siege. The overall flow of the fight is just so much better than the Kulif Siege, and Safy itself just has a way better aesthetic, I feel. Both sieges though have a great way of building a sense of camaraderie between you and the other players you're hunting with by having messages pop up showing other groups' progress through the fight, with all progress being made contributing to the overall reward value. The rewards itself for the Safy Siege are pretty good. All of the weapons are pretty much the meta on the way to Vitalis, and the armor itself has some really good perks. Past the Safy update, the console and PC updates were finally synced up, which was great news. We got a few updates here and there, adding new quests and events, but it wasn't until July when we got our next new monster in Latreon. Latreon was very controversial in the community. On the one hand, you had players who had made the most meta sets in preparation, but since most weren't fire or ice, which is key to being Latreon, they were pretty much useless. On the other hand, you had people who thought it was good that Latreon forced us out of our comfort zone and to use sets that weren't the most meta. I personally fall into the second category. While I think Capcom could have given a better heads up of what to expect, I think it's still worthwhile to have challenging endgame content that isn't just solved by doing what we always do. The overall fight itself is pretty neat, I feel. I love the arena, and the transition between two different elements is just such a cool mechanic. With Latreon came Frostfang Barith, which is just another variation of a previous monster. I actually much prefer this version of Barith, as I'm just a sucker for a good ice monster. With this, we reach where we began this video. Vitalis is the last major monster being added, and he's a pretty good one to end on. The past 2.5 years have been pretty eventful, with plenty of quality updates to an already amazing game. It really is crazy to see Capcom's dedication to making this game as perfect as it can be. Since we've basically recapped the game's entire lifespan, I thought for the end I'd talk about my favorite things in it and a few things I don't like. Starting with decoration hunting. Decoration hunting is something I loathe doing. Hunting tempered monsters or farming one specific event quest is okay at first, but once you're stuck doing it for hours on end just to get the one deco you need for your set, it can get pretty annoying. Nothing will ever compare to the anxiety of getting carded more than once in a hunt, especially when you know everyone is just thinking about how terrible you really are. Thank God for Feline Safeguard and Insurance, honestly. They've saved me through many fights. As for my favorite things in the game, my favorite armor set is the Spring Blossom set. It's made of roses, and my name is Rose. Pretty easy connection there. I started the game using longswords and dual blades, but in the end, my favorite weapon type is the gun lance. The bombastic moveset it has is so much fun to play with, and while you're a heavy hitter, you're still pretty fast on your feet because of the quick dashes it comes with. My least favorite weapon type is probably the greatsword. I feel like I could just never get the hang of it, and I would miss more attacks than I would hit. My favorite area in the game is the Hoarfrost Reach. It's big, has a decent amount of verticality, and has enough unique areas throughout it. Plus it's a snowy environment, and I love snow. Starting to think I'm easy to please. My favorite monster overall would probably be the spiky boy Nergigante. He's really intimidating because of his big frame, with spikes coming out of every part of his body. His moveset has a lot of flash while still being really hard hitting. Plus his new version in Iceborn is somehow even more spiky, which is pretty neat. Close second though behind Nergigante is probably Beototus. It's a snow wheel that can be pretty annoying to fight, especially when you first encounter it, but I can't help but love the idea of it swimming through the snow. My least favorite monster is by far Kushaladora. Really annoying to fight while being pretty boring as far as Elder Dragons go. Those wind attacks are a real bastard, man. Can't really think of anything else to talk about. This video has been rambling enough. I'll probably keep playing. I'm having a good enough time helping lower level hunters throughout the game. But as we look to the future with Rise getting announced not that long ago in a Nintendo Direct, I can't help but feel a little sad, but also pretty excited. While Rise won't be on the same scale as World since it's on the Switch, I'm sure it'll keep up the same standard of excellence that Monster Hunter is known for. From all the trailers I've watched, it looks really good, and I'm really digging the new additions that they're adding. Well, that's about all I have to say. If you haven't checked out World, I highly recommend that you do, as now with all the updates out, you can fully experience the game with nothing else on the horizon. This has been Sheep, and I hope you enjoyed the video.